What's up YouTube, this is Demkeys back again with another Unity tutorial, and today I will teach you how to use the interactive cloth component. The interactive cloth is a component that is used to simulate cloth-like physics on an object. You need to keep in mind the interactive cloth is not meant to be used for things like capes or any other thing that you might want to attach to your character. For that purpose you should use a skinned cloth, not an interactive cloth. So let's begin. I have added a plane to our scene, and next we need to add cubes. We are going to add two cubes and name them cube 1 and cube 2. Oh yes, I forgot to mention, we will also be stretching them out. Okay, next we need to add our cloth object. So as you can see, this object contains three components: transform, interactive cloth, and cloth renderer. This is our cloth object. Okay, next let's attach a material to it so it gets some color, so it's more easier for you to see. Nothing special, I'm just going to attach a red material to it. Okay, so now we can start playing around with it. The first thing we're going to do is attach this cloth to these two cubes. Now one thing you need to keep in mind when attaching any sort of collider to your cloth, the vertices of the cloth, that's these things, they should be intersecting the collider of whatever object you are attaching the cloth to. If it is not attached, if they are not intersecting, you might get unexpected results. I'm going to rotate this cloth. As you can see, it's already intersecting. I think I need to make the cubes a little more further apart. I think this should be fine. I'll just raise the cloth a little bit. Now this is still, let's keep it down because we want the cloth to bend. For this example I need to show you the cloth bending. Okay, this should do for now. Let's shift this a little bit. You probably don't need to see the game view, because to show you the effect I'm mostly going to be moving things around in the scene view. Okay, so now that we are sure that the vertices of the cloth object are intersecting the colliders of both of our cubes, we can attach both these cubes to our cloth. To do so, you have to click on Attach Colliders under the Interactive Cloth component. Initially the size will be 0. Now based on the number of objects you want to attach, you can enter that number. I have 2, so I'm going to enter 2. We get element 0 and element 1. So here we can add our cubes. Cube 1, sorry. Cube 1 and cube 2. If for some reason you are unable to drag and drop, you can also click on this circle with the dot and select which object you want. Alright, so now that we have done this, let's run the game, see what happens. As you can see, the cloth is attached to both of these objects and there is gravity affecting it, as It is checked over here. So there is gravity affecting the cloth, and so the cloth is coming down, just as in real life if you're holding a cloth from two sides and it's not stretched out completely, it's going to bend. Okay, next, what do we do next? Okay, I'm going to add another cube. Sorry, I'll just copy one of these and I will name this cube 3. Now we are not going to attach this to the cloth object. It is not attached. It's not attached. It is just really close to the object. Okay, let's bring it more down. So you can see it's not attached, and it's not intersecting the cloth either. Now if I run the game now, the cloth is not soft enough. It's not stretchy enough to touch down there. So just to show you that it is actually colliding with that cube, I'm going to change the stretching stiffness. What is stretching stiffness? This is the stiffness of the cloth while stretching. Basically how much the cloth can be stretched, or how much the cloth will stretch. You can set a value anywhere between 0.001 and 1 being max. Let's see what happens when we reduce the value. We'll not reduce it from before. I'm going to run the game, and now I will slowly reduce this value. You can see the cloth is becoming more stretchy, and eventually it collides with this cube, and then that's where you can see the cloth bending. Okay, so this is what stretching stiffness does. Next, bending stiffness. Let's see what happens when we increase this value. So for those of you who are confused between bending stiffness and stretching stiffness is how much the cloth can be stretched, or how much, not can be, but how much the cloth will stretch. Bending stiffness is how much the cloth will bend. It has nothing to do with stretching. Bending happens when gravity is applied to, well, it happens even when gravity is not applied. It's going to bend in other directions. But yeah, so this is what bending does. One is incredibly stiff. The cloth is not bending all that much. And you can take it down. 0. It's going to have a lot of bend in it. So the cloth is really soft. Okay, now let's look at damping. Damping. This basically damps the cloth's motion. What that means is the cloth, while it is falling down, or in this case bending or stretching or whatever, that motion is going to be either slowed down or sped up depending on what value you set. So we need this sort of setup, not a really stiff setup, in order to properly see the damping property. So I'm going to set these values 0 and 0.15 from before, and I'll change damping to, okay, let's change it to 1. 1 is the maximum, so it's going to bend really slow. It will get to wherever it has to get, but it's going to do that really slow. Watch what happens when I play the game. Maybe I should move this game object. Can I disable it? Yeah, okay. And sorry about that. Okay, Let's make the stiffness a little more less, or a little a little more less. No, uh, let's make the stiffness even lower than what it was before. It was 0.15. I've made it 0.05, and the damping is set to 1. Let me show you what happens when damping is 0. Okay, now let's see what happens when damping is 1. You can see the cloth is moving really slow. Let's bring this plane down. Okay, so that is damping. This is with 0, and then you have 1. Okay, let's change this back to, okay, let's keep the stretching the same, but we'll change damping back to 0. Now let's change the thickness of the cloth surface. This might be a little hard for me to explain to you, but let me try with an example. I mean, you already know what thickness is, and you can set it anywhere between 0.001 and 10,000. So you can make the cloth really thick. Now let's see if it, first let me show you what happens when it is at this thickness. Now let's change the thickness to say 5. The cloth became really thick, and I guess that's the reason why it's bending upwards. Let's change the thickness during runtime. Yeah. Let's try moving this. No, doesn't affect. I guess the thickness has to be really low in order for the movement to take effect. Okay, so that is thickness. You can use it for, I'm not sure in what case you would use that, but that is useful as well. Next you have the option use gravity, whether or not you want to use gravity. Let's uncheck it and see what happens, whether it'll go down or go up. Oh, sorry, I forgot to change this to 0.2. It's not going down because gravity is not being applied to it. So even with this stiffness, it's not going down. Let's apply the gravity back and watch the results. There you go. Next you have self collision. This is whether this tells whether or not the cloth should collide with itself. I think it would be used in cases where you're hanging the cloth on some sort of really thin object, and so both the ends of the cloth will eventually collide. I think that's what it would be for. Next you have external acceleration. Now you have two of them, external acceleration and random acceleration. Random will be, I'm guessing, anywhere between 0 and whatever value you set on whichever axis. So I'm first going to show you external acceleration. Let's apply 10 along the y-axis and minus 10 along the z-axis. Let's see what happens when we run the game. You can see it looks like wind is blowing from the other side, from beneath the cloth. I can increase force along the y axis, and it looks even more like there's even more wind blowing at the cloth. Okay, let's change these values back to 0 and use the same thing with random acceleration. Now, because I want a wider range, so I think I'm going to keep it 30 and minus 30. I hope that's not too much. You can see sometimes at random the force is applied, the acceleration, sorry. At random the acceleration is applied to the cloth. And so it's like sometimes there's wind blowing, sometimes not. Looks more real if you think about it. Next is the mesh. This is, it's a little hard for me to explain, but it's kind of what gives the shape to your cloth, because I tried changing this to cube and that happens. So if you change it to any of these, then it's going to look like that shape. Let's see what happens when we run the game with a capsule mesh. Okay, that didn't work very well. I think it fell down because its vertices are not intersecting the colliders. If you remember right, I told you the vertices need to be intersecting the colliders of all the objects that are attached to this cloth. So we will change this back to plane and move on. Next, friction. Now I tried working with this, it just didn't work out very well. So I'm not really sure how to explain this, but on Unity's website it just says it's the friction of the cloth. I tried rolling a sphere on it, but the sphere, I guess it's got so much mass that it just falls through the cloth. Next you've got density. Density, again, it's something hard for me to explain. So is pressure and collision response. Collision response says it's the force to apply back to rigid bodies. So I'm guessing when a rigid body collides with this cloth, that is when you apply a force, and a rigid body collides with this cloth, then a certain amount of force might be applied back, the object might bounce back, something like that. Next you've got attachment tear factor. This is how far the objects, or I guess whatever is attached to this cloth, needs to be stretched before the cloth will tear off. And this works only if tearing is actually enabled. We can try messing around with this. Currently it is 0.5. Let's set it to 5 and try to pull our cloth. So I'm going to select cube 2 since the cloth is also attached to cube 2, and I'm going to pull. You can see the cloth is actually being pulled, and it's stretching a lot because of the stretching stiffness that I had set. So I'm going to zoom out and pull it further. Let's see how far it goes before it tears. Oh, this is stretching a lot. I need to change the stretching stiffness to, okay, I forgot what the stiffness was earlier. I think 0.5. Okay, so it's not stretching as much as it was stretching before. So let's see how far it'll go. Okay, this is going really far. Okay, sorry about that. I had a small confusion because of which it wasn't working. Before I get to that, I had told you that I don't know what pressure does. It basically builds air pressure within the cloth. So suppose if I set it to 5 and I run the game, it's as if there is air within the cloth. I can reduce it and the cloth is gonna become more stable. And for those of you who are having doubts about how you can see a cloth from both sides, like I mean you can see it from this side, but from that side it's from below it's not visible. I checked it, I looked it up on YouTube, sorry, on Unity's forums. What you need to do is use a double-sided shader. Now I don't know how to write shaders, so I can't help you with that, but I'm sure if you do your research you'll either learn how to make one or you might find one for free. So best of luck with that. Okay, so now you know what pressure does. Now on with the tear factor. So attachment tear factor. We have set this to, let's set it to 3. This is how far your attachment will be able to pull the cloth before the cloth actually detaches from the attachment. Now in order to get this to work, which is what I forgot earlier, you need to check tearable. You need to check tearable on whichever object you want the cloth to detach from. You can do it from both, in which case it's going to detach from either one. But for just for an example, I'm going to make it tearable from cube 1 and not from cube 2. And I've set it to 3, so it's going to go up to a very short distance and then detach. Let's run the game. I need to set this pressure to 0. Now let's run the game. As you can see, the cloth has detached from cube 1 and it is still attached to cube 2, and so this is what attachment tear response is. Next would be attachment response. This is again something that I cannot explain to you. Sorry about that. I just haven't been able to find any examples. I mean, I tried experimenting in various different ways. So far nothing has worked, but I'm sure eventually I'll find out. If any of you find it out, do let me know. Next, tear factor. Now this is not to be confused with attachment tear factor, because attachment tear factor is how far the cloth will stretch before it detaches from the attachment. And then you've got tear factor, which is basically how much the cloth's vertices will stretch before they tear. So the cloth is actually going to tear. Let's change this back to 0 and change this to non-tearable, and let's set a distance of 3 over here. Now let's pull it and see what happens. As you can see, the cloth actually tore. If I select the cloth, half the mesh is here and half is here, and one piece fell somewhere down. I think it's still falling. So that is the difference between tear factor and attachment tear factor. What is remaining? Two-way interaction. This is again something that I haven't been able to understand. Initially I thought it was so that you'll be able to do this. I thought it was for that, but it works either way. This, I'm still able to do it even though two-way interaction is not checked. So I'm gonna need some time to find it out. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That is how you use the interactive cloth. I hope this video was helpful. Do check out these other videos as well. The video on the top left demonstrates simple level design. The video on the top right teaches you the basics of Mechanim, and in the bottom video you will learn how to create game objects and add components using script. Visit my channel for more videos. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Leave your comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.
When he get the chance to hang, like, damn, 1 3 4 niggas acting like I never been through them.